Welcome to Unity Radiant Light. It is Sunday, October 15th. Can't believe it. It is we're in fall now, and today is the conclusion of the Fall Prosperity series based on The Soul of Money by author Lynn Twist. And today we're going to be talking about changing the dream. I'm Reverend Cherie Ruffo. And as we've enjoyed this series over the past 6 weeks, we've talked about the soul of money. We've talked about instead of coming from a scarcity when we're working on prosperity principles, coming from a place of sufficiency. It's a lot shorter jump to do that. And also we're in a more prosperous frame of mind. We've talked about the things in our society, how it focuses on scarcity, how we need to shift that. And as we've gone through each of these, we've looked at different parts of the world. A lot of the indigenous populations, we've learned so much from them. And today we're going to be talking about changing your dream, which is another indigenous principle. I'm going to start with a quote from John Perkins, and it's from The World Is As You Dream It. We have dreamed it, therefore it is. I have become convinced that everything we think and feel is merely perception, that our lives individually as well as community are molded around such perception, and that if we want to change, we must alter our perception. When we give our energy to a different dream, the world is transformed. To create a new world, we must first create a new dream. And I love this quote because it really describes what we have to do to make that shift into not just sufficiency, but into full prosperity. And it comes from the thought forms from the indigenous of South America. They look around, and many of the indigenous cultures slowly have come into communicating with the outer world. There's a few tribes that have just come on recently, and all of them know that our dream in this world, especially if we live in the United States, it's about getting more all the time, but more, and measuring people how much they're worth. That's where a lot of times the value is put. And they see this collision course that we're on, especially when it comes to the ecology of the planet, the things that we're using up so much. And they say we have to change our dream. And they recognize that unless we change our dream, we're going to continue to see the rainforests and the coral reefs and so much more forests disappear. And our ecology, how the planet is going to respond to that, is going to be much harsher. We're going to see a lot more movement in the planet, maybe more volcanoes, things that, as we're seeing in the Northeast, we're seeing a lot more tornadoes. I don't remember seeing those as much. So we have to change our dream to protect the planet. And the indigenous and the elders believe that the world is as you dream it. Very similar to some of the beliefs that we have at the Unity Truth students. And the dream that we have in the modern world has to shift. Before we're going to see it, we have to shift it from the more syndrome, more factories, more companies, more freeways, more houses, bigger houses, more buildings, more cars, more of everything, and become relaxed in sufficiency. They point out that this dream that we have is becoming a nightmare to the planet. And it's not just, it's impacting everybody around the world. It is in the South Pacific, where some of the islands are going to be gone within a few years, where people live on them, they're losing their homes. And they know, the indigenous understand that it's going to be hard for us to change this dream because so much of our culture is built around it. But they believe that if we start now, the next generation will be more accepting of it. And to the next generation, we'll see healing on the planet. And I believe that we'll see much more satisfaction in our lives. So we have to redream it. And we have to learn to question the cultural dream as it is. More and more, we have to create a future that's consistent with our reverence toward, respect for, and affirmation of life, of all life on the planet. And it would mean that we would be seeing the world more in alignment with the indigenous and so many others on the planet. They see the world, the indigenous, when they look at the world, they see it as sufficient. They see it animated by spirit. We see that with the spirit animals. intelligent, that it's mystical, responsive, and creative. They don't see it with lack. It's constantly, this planet is constantly generating and regenerating itself. We saw this during the pandemic. When we all went home, all of a sudden we saw cities that we hadn't seen through smog in years. And it didn't take that long either. Unfortunately, when we do this, when we have more and more and more, so much of what we value gets lost too, the beauty of our planet. And if we move into this dream that they're talking about, this dream where we have sufficiency, this dream where the value isn't just based on money, everybody on this planet will have the capacity to create, collaborate, and continue and contribute. Not just a few. We'll see them happen. We've seen it happening in other countries where they begin to think of possibilities instead of in the negative and find solutions to the problems. The way our world is set up for so many is that a few win and everybody else gets less, or has to share the rest. Because if there's competition, we try to eliminate it. Our true wealth, when we look at it, we say, okay, well, what is true wealth? And we know as Unity True students, it's divine ideas that we have, these ideas that come to us that we can nurture, and we can do things that we love, the creativity and the wealth in our nature and in relationships that's available to all people. And to step out of the system that erodes that. And Indigenous people around the world, as we've looked at them and as we've looked at so many of those cultures, they already operate by divine ideas. And some do it through dreams. In South America, particularly, the shamans and the elders follow the dream work. And what they're asking us to do in our dream work is to change our dreams to align with theirs. They want us to recognize the value, the dream on this planet, the beauty. And we've seen this before. We know that when Gandhi was here and he was looking for independence from the United Kingdom, he said the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And that is so true. When we think about that and where we can go, we go within to find that sufficiency. We go within and realize that the relationships are so important. Buckminster Fuller said, everyone has the perfect gift to give the world. And if each of us is freed up to give our unique gift, the world would be in total harmony. Well, think about it, because each of us would be operating from a place where with divine ideas of creativity, of happiness, because we're doing what we wanted to. So we have new ways to redream this world, to recreate our world, using money as a currency of love and a conduit of commitment, instead of using it just to acquire things. And that's going to be the distinction for where we are, where our mindset is. Even Archimedes understood this 2,000 years ago when he said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I will move the world. So we have to take a stand, knowing that we can move this world, the world of ideas and people who act on them. When we take a stand and change this and change our attitude, we're affecting the mass consciousness. We know this as Unity Truth students. We're shining the light back on the world, and we're helping that shift that needs to happen on this planet. And this, knowing this, is the very heart of who you are. This is the best kind of prosperity we could ever dream of. Changing that dream. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean about it shifting what people can do? Well, it just so happens, and I'm sure that's no accident, I went to see this movie yesterday called Dumb Money. Now, some of the lyrics of some of the songs in it, I wasn't too fond of, but the premise of it just kind of blew me away, because there was so much happening after the election and January 6th. I didn't really pay attention to what was happening here in 2021. And the premise of this was that this younger generation was looking at what was happening in the stock market and realizing that a few people were super wealthy, hedge funds, would take companies and they would short the stocks. So they would make billions of dollars on it because they knew it would fall. So they were making the decisions of what companies were going to survive and what wouldn't. And what happened here, and you can see that with, especially with Generation Z coming in, is the people, and they called it dumb money because the hedge fund people said, well, when real people contribute, it's just dumb money. It's not going to go anywhere. We're always going to have control over this. But this isn't what happened. These people decided they liked GameStop and that they wanted GameStop to survive, and they all invested in it. And even when things were done to make them try to give up because they'd made so much money, and Wall Street was losing money like crazy over the decision, they stopped them from being allowed to contribute to it. They brought down the websites for it. A lot of people held on because they knew it wasn't about the money. It was about making the point that this shouldn't be happening, that these few people shouldn't be making all of these billions and billions of dollars by taking down other companies. And it's really a fascinating story. And I sat there and I realized, wow. And these people, they didn't have thousands and thousands, most of them, to give. Some of them were giving, $10 at a time, $20 at a time. And they took back their power, took back the power of Wall Street, brought down some of the huge hedge funds, and made the point that it's not dumb money, that people still have a choice. And that's what we have to understand, because in so many cases, I know people feel just helpless over a situation. And the truth is that when we step out of that crisis, step out of the scarcity consciousness on that, and start to think about what we can do, we see things like what happened with dumb money. Points were made. You don't get to, put people out of business. Thousands of people losing jobs. And it's a remarkable point. So no matter where we are and what we have this creative potential inside of us. We have the power to make these decisions. And we can take a stand. And I'm not saying this is what you should do. But when we move to a place where we're grounded in sufficiency, we know that it's always trustworthy and life affirming, always resonant. And at some level, this group that invested in this, even though they were making the leader of it made at one point $54 million, but he didn't, and then it dropped down because of what was being done. But it was he knew the right thing and the stance that he wanted to make, and the point he wanted to make was, it's not about the money, it's about what's right and what's not. So we have the power of changing scarcity around money. We can change it into this conduit, a way to express our highest ideals like we saw here, and use it as a currency of love and commitment. And the author says, money is a great translator of intention to reality, vision to fulfillment. When you live from a context of sufficiency and you take a stand for something, you open your heart and the hearts of people in the world around you. When you do that, you build a vision, create the reality, and grow it such that obstacles eventually fall away. We saw this with Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Mother Teresa. Throughout history, there have been people not elected or appointed, born to power, and changed the course of human history. And they can do it. You can do it with what you decide to do with your money. You can do it through boycotts, contributions, purposeful purchasing, making a decision, knowing the source of what you're buying from. Where did it come from? Were people treated ethically while it was being made? Was it ethically sourced from that community? Starting to ask the questions. The power is available to all of us. It's not just people who have a certain amount of money. And we know that when people decide to do something, it doesn't matter what level it's on, it changes the world. And it can change the course of history. So people with little or no money are just as capable of directing the flow of money. We saw this. I saw this here yesterday with dumb money. So that the money will flow, resources are meaningful, and contributions to society are bigger. piece of Inuit wisdom about this. Words do not label things already there. Words are like the knife of a carver. They free the idea, the thing, from the general formlessness of the outside. As a man speaks, not only is his language in the state of birth, but also the very thing which he's talking. So when we have this belief and we make that shift and then we proclaim it, we change everything. The Inuits knew it all these past few thousands of years. You know, and I think back to the economic downturn in 2008 and 2009, and it was really a tough time for me in my life. I was going through a divorce, as most of you know, but my not for profit that I had worked at for 14 years went under. So many of my friends were out of jobs. We had fear about the future. We didn't know. I lost a house in the process, didn't know how it was going to end or where it was going to come out. But somewhere in the middle of it all, we were talking and meditating, and we had this shift. We decided to shift to make this fun. You know, we used to meet at restaurants and every week for dinner and catch up. And we decided that we would have game nights. We took turns being at each other's houses. We had one rule, as many of you know, is that bring what's in your freezer, your cupboard, make something out of it and bring it. It wasn't about us spending money. It was about the quality of our time together. And today we might go out and, make something that we buy from the store, but my favorite nights are still the game nights when we spend time in each other's company, sharing ideas, having fun and laughing like we just laughed from the time we started to the time we ended. Instead of being at home crying or crying because we couldn't go to a restaurant, we had the best time. And what I found in all of this, yes, I had a shortage in my bank account, and sometimes it was really hard to keep my commitments for things that I needed to pay for. But the important things I found were the relationships that I had. My friends didn't change. In fact, we grew stronger relationships in many cases. Our friendships deepened. We were healthy. Maybe I was healthy from the low temperatures I kept my house at. At one point, I kept the heat so low that winter that my dishwashing detergent turned white. Not a good thing in my kitchen, but I didn't get sick because my house was so low that germs couldn't survive. So there was the positive, right? So the question we have here, do we join mass consciousness? How do we contribute to it? Mass consciousness of scarcity, what's happening is really terrible. How can this continue to happen? Or do we create a new mass consciousness about the possibilities, using creativity, what we can do to make the changes? Because I look back to 2008, 9, and the truth was I was always okay. I had to shift my perspective from lack to appreciating my blessings. And what I found is that a lot of them were non-material, and they're deep. They can never change. And they're valuable to me. They're more valuable than anything I could possibly have. Because the core of my true wealth is my life, my joy, and the relationships I have around me. And it wasn't until I denied the seriousness of the situation, when I sat down, and it wasn't that I was denying what was happening. I just decided not to focus on it as much. I changed my dream. And I'll tell you, it changed, everything shifted immediately, except for I didn't see money in my account for a while. But my perspective about it changed, and things started happening, started having opportunities, and I started having things that I didn't see before when I was in the scarcity, because the biggest fear I ever had was losing my job and not being able to support myself. Well, I learned I could survive that. And I learned that I could have some fun while surviving that. And I learned that when I changed my mind about what was happening, everything changed for me. As that financial crisis continued, people were angry and fearful. I finally had to turn the television off and go into the silence more. And I do that today a lot too. Because it was there I found the richness of my life. It was really important. So in 2008, when I look back, I don't see it as the year that everything changed and we had all these losses. I look at it as the That was the year I found the gift of my true wealth and sufficiency. We saw this also during the pandemic, which I call a great pause. I found myself, I was on the road so much beforehand. I was trapped driving alone 22 to 25,000 miles a year. So I was always going at meetings, tired. And today, since then, I put less than 10,000 miles a year on my car, but I also during the pandemic learned to love being at home, learned to love watching the seasons change and seeing what was happening in the trees in my yard. I have this hummingbird family that I love, and all of these other things that happened, going outside barefoot, meditating. These were the gifts, the sufficiency that I was able to find that I was missing before the pandemic. So the truth is that our inner resources are never diminished by the outer things, such as the stock market, a pandemic, a diagnosis, a change in a relationship. And you have to work through those changes. It doesn't always happen immediately. But if we can just take a breath, center ourselves, maybe we can start to look for some of the possibilities. So what's important in your life? Have you seen a shift in the past couple of decades? And I'm going to ask you if you're here watching this, or if you're not, if you're watching this on YouTube later, to just you can get out a pad of paper. People that are here today, I just invite you to write down in the chat box. You know, what kind of shift have you seen, or what shift would you like to see? Because we're going to be meditating on this in a few minutes. And you can just put down the shift, the things that you've left behind. You can put down, what do you want to see in your life? What do you want to see in this world? As we move from into pure sufficiency, into prosperity. What are your ideas? What's your creativity? What is it that you want? Because we don't want to finish this series without answering that question. It is something that we must answer. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's more fun. Maybe it's more laughter in your life. Divine ideas. Deciding what your purpose is, whatever it is. It's okay and it's right. And no matter what's happening, you can be concerned about it. Take the action you have to do and do your best. But don't panic. Activate the power of faith and take it from there. You may not regain what you lose in the midst of a crisis, or what you see as a loss in the midst of a crisis. I didn't get my house back. The not-for-profit I work for didn't survive. But I went on and I have an amazing home that I love, and I have amazing relationships, and I have a job jobs that I love to do, and I get to share with people. I'm able to give back to the world. So most importantly, I learned to face my biggest fears and found that I could overcome them by understanding how blessed I really am, and I've always been. So what is that for you? You know, we live in this world, we're having our human experiences. The important thing is we learn here is to write down, to decide, to declare what the experiences we want to have a conversation about it, what the changes we'd like to see in the world. And we have to understand the circumstances that we're faced with. So are we having a conversation about fear and terror, about economy, revenge, anger, retribution, jealousy, envy, lack, comparison? Then you have to understand that is the world you're going to see. So if we can shift these, the possibility, gratitude, appreciation for the things we have, then that's the world we're going to inhabit. That's the world we're going to share together. So the author talks about this. She says that scarcity speaks in terms of never enough, emptiness, fear, mistrust, envy, greed, hoarding. You guys remember the toilet paper debacle in 2020, right? Some people won't have to buy any more toilet paper to 2050. We live in this world where there's competition, fragmentation, separateness, judgment, striving, entitlement, control. We're busy surviving, outer riches. And the author says in the conversation for scarcity, we judge, compare, criticize, we label winners and losers. We celebrate increasing quantity and excess. We center ourselves in yearning, expectation, and dissatisfaction. We define ourselves as better than or worse than. And unfortunately, we're letting this money define us. She goes on to say that rather than defining ourselves in a deeper way and expressing that quality through our money, sufficiency speaks in terms of gratitude, fulfillment, love, trust, respect, contributing, faith, compassion, integration, resilience, and inner riches. In the conversation of sufficiency, we know we can make a difference. We can recognize, we can affirm and embrace this. She talks about us making that shift, deciding what we can do to make the world a better place. And it might be through prayer, just the inner work that we're doing, which is really valuable. It might be through making a decision to support something or not support it. It might be making decisions to research what we're buying before we do and finding out what the source of it is. Right. So whatever we want to do, however we want to contribute, we can do it. There's no limitation on it. And we would look back to 9/11, we see these atrocities committed. We saw that they were committed, and most of us, and I know I was, glued to the TV for days about it. But what happened was there was also some of the greatest acts of bravery, selflessness, compassion. We saw an airplane go down in Pennsylvania because they wanted to save the White House. We saw people stepping forward every day, heroic rescue efforts, and also through letters to families, prayers. There were prayer chains going. They were making a difference. When President George Bush at the time stood at the site of 9/11 and asked the world to pray, it was even recorded in the frequency of the planet at that time because people around the world stopped and we prayed together, and it lifted the energy of the planet. And we know that people donated food and clothing, donating blood to make sure that everybody had enough money for the families who lost people and for the rescue workers. And we saw just in 2020 in our own ministry for 2 years, 2 solid years, 24 times, we made lunch on a monthly basis for the unhoused and people living in poverty. We went out, we sourced, we found supplies, donations, we gave them out. And we had a front line of volunteers who went out and met the people no matter what was happening in the pandemic. They were there. We got together. It was some of the best times we could have had too, getting together in that kitchen at the church and cooking together and providing and putting together the meals. Our group made a decision that, yes, there's a pandemic going on, but we wanted to see and make sure that the people around us were okay. And there was a lot of compassion there and beauty. And I'm really grateful to be part of a group that made that decision. So we are aware of what's happening in the world around us today, but the choice is ours. Where are we going to put our attention? So let us review our dream of what we think our world and our lives should be and change that dream if we need to. Remember what the Indian scholar here, Shantadeva, said, and it was a little bit more than this. He said, we have no hope of finding enough leather to cover the earth so that we never prick our feet on a thorn. But actually, we don't need to. Enough to cover the soles of our feet will suffice. And I thought that was a perfect way to wrap up this series. So let's get together. Let's dream. Change our dream when we need to. Great. Turn to possibilities. Love and excitement over our future. And above all, I'm so grateful to be on this journey with each one of you. It's a wonderful journey I look forward to continuing. as we open our hearts and our minds and our souls to new possibilities, creating things that'll make the world a better place. Namaskar. So as we go to our meditation, I am open and receptive to the spirit of truth, healing in me what needs to be healed, revealing to me what needs to be revealed. As we move into meditation, I'm just going to drop us down and take a look at our chat box. As we go through meditation, I'm going to be winding this in, these ideas, these thoughts, the creativity from each one of you into the meditation. I just invite you to close your outer eyes if you're comfortable doing that. So we take a nice deep breath in all the way down into our stomachs. And as we release, we just release any uncomfortableness we may have with maybe some new ideas. And as we breathe in for the world. And we breathe out the current dream of scarcity, all the things that go with it, the fighting. As we continue to breathe in, we breathe in love and compassion. And we breathe out any of the things that we talked about. Competition that tries to destroy others. We breathe in love. We breathe in opportunity. It's amazing. We have people wanting to contribute with musical gifts with the world. Robin, I can't do it. Understanding and acceptance without judgment. Let's breathe that in. Inclusivity. Compassion for each other. Love. As we breathe this in deeper and deeper. As we drop into the silence, we do so knowing that this is all possible because of you. And as we drop into this as a group, we know that Jesus said, where two or more are gathered, there I am. So there I am, group. There's no such thing as linear time in the quantum prayer field. So whether you're doing this right now or later, it's still the now. So as we drop into the silence, we do so full of love, possibilities, and just sit in silence for a few moments. As we come out of the silence, we can stay in that prayer field, enjoying that time of prosperity and sufficiency, and knowing that we make a difference. And through our love and compassion and divine ideas, we are changing not only our dream, but we're changing the world. And for this, we are so grateful. And as we hold this today, these thoughts and prayers, we look at it and we see it in unity is already done. We see every person with their selves working in perfect and divine order. We see prosperity and sufficiency consciousness enveloping the planet gently. especially in the places that need it the most. And with it comes that inner joy that can never be shifted, and peace that so many desire, the peace that Jesus talked about. And we know that no matter where we are and what we aren't separate from each other. And that the field that we come from is love. So let's be love. We're so grateful for Jesus, our way shower, teaching us this, and so many of the guides and the masters who came before and after him, the teachers today. We are so grateful as we say thank you, and so it is.